All right. Seeing it's 9:02 and we've got about uh, quite a few people in. So thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. I just want to thank you all for obviously participating or wanting to participate in the CUSC survey. Obviously, without you guys, wouldn't be able to to run the survey. So really appreciate your participation. Um, and we hope that you will continue to participate in the future. So this year's survey was obviously the first year survey, first year student survey, and we are obviously always grateful that PRA can help administer it for us. They do a lot of obviously they run the survey, they do a lot of coordination, help us set up with the survey. So yeah, we really appreciate the PRA help that we get. And with that, yeah, I'll pass it over to Nicholas.
Perfect. Thank you, Wayne. So I'm going to get the presentation started. All right. So this is the presentation on the results from the 2025 first year student survey. So the survey, this is the 31st time the survey has been undertaken by CUSC. This year, there were 39 universities from across Canada who participated in the survey, which is a little bit down from 44, which participated in the last first year student survey in 2022. So the survey was sent to almost 48,000 first year students across Canada, achieving responses from almost 12,000 with an overall response rate of 25%, which ranges from by institution from 14 all the way up to 56%. The response rate this year at 25% is down from 31%, which was achieved in the last time the first year student survey was done in 2022. So just one thing to note as we go through the slides. So universities select their sample of first-year students. Some run it on a census, some only taking a sample of the total number of first-year students. And so data that's presented here is weighted back to match the entire student population from each participating institution. So looking at the profile of first-year students, so what do our first-year students look like? So in terms of their profile, 3% have children, 49% identify as a racialized person, 87% identify as a Canadian citizen. 63% are female compared to about 36% of males, and this information is identified through the sample file we receive. And with an average student age of 19 years of age, not surprising for first-year students. 5% identify as Indigenous and 76% are single. Some notes about information here. We do tend to find that students differ in age depending on the university. So we analyze results by what's called university group. Group 1, 2, and 3. Group 1 universities are universities that will be tend to be smaller. They tend not to have master's, PhD programs, medical or law school. Those would be your Group 1 university. Group 2 universities tend to be slightly larger, may have some graduate programs. And Group 3 universities would be your largest universities, those with graduate programs, law schools, medical schools. What we do tend to find here is that those who attend Group 1 universities, those smallest universities, tend to be older on average than those who attend Group 2 or Group 3 universities. We also tend to find that Group 1 students, also because they're older, tend to be more likely to be married, more likely to have children. Also, students who identify as racialized, they also tend to be more likely to be single than those who are non-racialized students. So looking at those who identify as having a disability or impairment, 33% identify as having a disability or impairment. This is similar to what we saw amongst the cohort in 2022, up a little bit from the previous one in 2019. The most common disabilities or impairments that are found, the top one by far is those who identify as having a mental health issue, also those who are neurodivergent at 14%. When you look at this, so 33% for some may seem high. We've heard comments in the past saying that this perhaps overrepresents, but when we ask to say, well, those who are impacted by their disability or impairment on a daily basis, that 33% drops down to 11% of students who say they're impacted on a daily basis. The most common one of those is neurodivergence. We do see some differences here in those who identify as having a disability or impairment by whether or not students identify as a racialized student. Those who are racialized tend to be less likely to identify. 26% of those students identify as having a disability or impairment compared to 41% of those who do not identify as a racialized student. Looking at students' living arrangements, so where are they living? We find that the majority, 50%, are living with family. Close to are in some sort of rented. Most of it is rented on campus. A third of students are renting on campus. And 3% own home, which is not surprising given the average age of students. We do see some differences here in living arrangements by different groups. Students who are attending group 1 and 2 universities, so again, those are some of the smaller universities, tend to be more likely to be living independently, so they're less likely to be living with their family. Again, recalling that group 1 students also tended to be older, which maybe accounts for some of that. Students who identify as a racialized student, they're less likely to be living on campus. 27% of them live on campus compared to 44% of non-racialized students. As you expect, there's also a relationship here with age. As students are older, they are less likely to be living with family and more likely to be living independently. So looking now at the academic profile of first-year students. So 89% of students are in first year are studying full-time. 7% say they have transferred to this institution from another institution. And 83% report having a grade of B minus or higher. And you can see there 39% have a grade of A minus or higher in the courses they've taken so far in their first year. Do see some differences here as well amongst academic groups. Those attending smaller institutions, so those group 1 institutions, they're more likely to be studying part-time. Also, there's differences here by age. Those first-year students who are older, they are more likely to be studying part-time. They're more likely to have transferred also from another institution. So what is their motivation for attending? So why are they attending university? So this is the top motivators for attending university in general. So not attending their specific university, but just why are they going out and trying to get a university degree? So when we look at them broken out by two things, so we look at them in two ways. The proportion who say it is important or very important, and also then we have them ranked, say, well, what is the most important thing to you? So when we look at most important, what jumps out is those who say they are preparing for a specific job. And then when you look at those who just say it's very important or important, you don't see as much sort of difference. So that ability to say, well, this one is the most important helps to separate those a little bit, but you can see at the top end, those top three are all employment related, whether it's more likely to get a job, preparing for a specific job, or get a job that is fulfilling. Those are in your top three. We do see some differences here by groups. There are some differences here by age. Younger students are more likely to say they're attending university to meet new people, and they're more likely to say they're attending university to meet their family's expectations. Those also students who identify as racialized, they're more likely to say that it's important that they're attending university to meet their family's expectations. So how are they choosing? So that's the motivation to go to university. Now, how are they going about selecting the university in which they are going to attend? So looking at it first and foremost, 77% say they've applied to other universities. So besides the one they're attending, 16% also said they applied to a college or cégep. And 79% are attending their first choice university. We see some differences here amongst groups. So those students attending group 2 universities, so sort of those mid-sized universities, they're most likely to have applied to multiple universities. As students get older, they are less likely to have applied to other universities. And also, we do see some differences here amongst those who identify as racialized students. Those who identify as racialized, they are less likely to say they're attending their first choice university. 72% say they're attending their first choice compared to 86% of students who do not identify as a racialized student. So the motivators for selecting their institution. So again, we look at this in terms of asked in two ways: the percentage that say it's important or very important, but also the percentage that say it is most important. So in terms of most important, having the program they want, which is not surprising given that the program is going to lead to those job outcomes we looked at earlier. But sort of secondary, you can see at the bottom is living close to home, which when you break this down by those who say it's important or very important, that living close to home is only sort of fifth. But when you say, well, what's the most important? There's a group here that are saying that is the most important factor to me. Again, some differences here we see amongst students by group. Students in group 2 universities, so those medium size, are more likely to prioritize selecting the university because of having it having a co-op or practicum experience. And group 3 students, so those in the largest universities, are most likely to say they're influenced by the city or town it is in and the availability of public transportation. We also see some differences here by age, where older students are less likely to rate some factors as important. They're less likely to say it's important because of the program it has, because it has financial assistance and the cost of tuition and fees. So what are motivators for international students? So students who are identified as being international students were asked to say, okay, factors related that might be related to international students, how important are they? And there are 5 here, so you can see as we go up, obtaining a visa was easier than other countries. Family or friend recommendations a little bit on the lower end. And on the higher end, the reputation of Canadian universities, the environment, and the cost of tuition were much stronger drivers or more importance amongst international students. Again, relationship here with age amongst international students. As students are older, they're less likely to say friends or family were a motivator, an important motivator for selecting their institution. So looking at sources of information, so the importance of various sources of information. So in terms of importance, there's sort of a group that sort of hovers around the 1/5 to 1/3 in terms of rating them as important. We get a little bit higher. We see things like parents and open house visits and other students around 4 and 10 saying it's important. And most important source of information is the university website. Some differences here by groups. The older a student is, they put less importance on things like their parents or visiting an open house for campus. Students who identify as racialized, they put more importance on factors that are lower, so not shown on this screen. Things such as QS World Rankings and the Times Higher Education World University Rankings. They are about double the importance as students who do not identify as racialized. So we figured out how they're getting there. Now, what are their experiences like once they've gotten to the university? So looking at orientation, we see that 62% say they attended orientation on campus in the fall. And for those who attended orientation, how satisfied they were. So satisfaction tends to be fairly high with everything in the sort of 80% plus category. So highest satisfaction with feeling welcome. There's a correlation here with age. As students get older, they are less likely to attend or say they have attended orientation. And looking at the registration process for their courses, 86% say they're satisfied with the courses they wanted to get into, while 81% are satisfied with the registration process as a whole, with no noticeable differences here between groups. So, in terms of meeting their expectations, did the university so far meet, exceed, or fall short of their expectations? So, the majority, about two-thirds, say the university just met their expectations, and you've got about 1 in 5 who say it's exceeded, and just slightly less that say it fell short. We do see a relationship here to this question with students' reported grades. Those who have higher grades are more likely to say that their university experiences have exceeded their expectations. For example, 25% of students with an average grade of A or higher say the university has exceeded their expectations. This drops down to 11% of students with a grade of C, average grade of C or lower. So how much success have they found transitioning to university? So we asked students to rate their success in 18 different areas, and the areas where they show the most success are in these 6 areas, all 89% or higher, with the most being finding their way around campus and understanding course material. In terms of where they find less success, um, the biggest difference here is getting involved in campus activities. That's where they find the least success, at about 50% saying they're having some or very much success. We do see some differences here amongst those 18 questions by some groups. Age, for example, the older a student is, the less success they report making friends. And also some differences here by grades. So as students' grades increase or their reported grades increase, they're more likely to say they've had success meeting academic commands, performing well in courses that require math, understanding course material, and managing their time. Looking at students' educational experiences. So looking at their perceptions of their professors. And so there's 2 ways we ask students about their perceptions of their professors. First is sort of a performance measure. So in terms of how much they agree or disagree that professors perform these actions, and then we ask them how important these actions are. So these are the top 5 areas in terms of performance. So professors perform best at treating students the same regardless of their race, treating students the same regardless of their gender, seeming knowledgeable, being accessible outside of class, and encouraging class discussions. These are where they perform the best. These are the highest agreement ratings. But then when we ask students to say, well, what is most important to you? Um, Only one of those areas where they are in the highest performance enters into the most importance. These other areas, communicating well, being well organized, useful feedback, and being intellectually stimulating, rank towards the bottom in terms of where they're important. So in terms of importance, they're what they say is most important is professors communicating well, which ranks 9th in their performance. So the areas where they're performing the best don't necessarily correlate to the areas that are most important to students. In terms of their opportunity to evaluate teaching, so generally speaking, most students say they've had the opportunity to evaluate teaching in at least some of their courses, with half saying that they have had the opportunity to evaluate their teaching in all of their courses. There is a relationship to this question with students' reported grades. As students' grades increase, they are more likely to say that they were able to evaluate the teaching in all of their courses. 58% of students with an A or higher say they were able to evaluate in all their courses, and that drops down to 39% of students with a grade average of C or lower. So in terms of their satisfaction with the quality of teaching they receive, you can see that most students are in that agreement or satisfied category. You've got more than 8 and 10, close to 9 and 10 that agree that they're satisfied with the quality of teaching, which includes 15% who strongly agree they're satisfied. Also, relationship to this question with grades again, those with a higher grade tend to be more likely to say they strongly agree that they're satisfied with the quality of teaching. 20% of those with an A or higher, compared to 9% of those with a C average or lower. In terms of perceptions of staff, whether teaching assistants are helpful or support for staff, those who agree or strongly agree, always high that teaching assistants and support staff are helpful at over 8 and 10 for teaching assistants and 9 and 10 for support staff. Looking at questions around inclusivity. So we ask students where they feel most comfortable being themselves, and where they feel most comfortable being themselves is attending class. That's the highest at 82%. followed by aspects such as interacting with friends on campus, interacting with professors, participating in class activities, and interacting with university staff. Then drops down a little bit, still close to 50%, with the lowest being attending campus social events and actively participating in social events where they feel most comfortable being themselves. There is some relationship here with some of these questions and age. In a few areas, as students get older, they are less likely to be comfortable being themselves, with the biggest difference for feeling comfortable interacting with friends on campus. Those who are 18 and younger, 79% say they feel comfortable being themselves, and that drops down across age groups down to 53% who say they feel comfortable, those who are 22 and older. So it's still early in their university career, but we want to see how committed they are to their program, how committed they are to finishing their degree. So 95% say they're willing to put in effort into their academics and university. 87% say they normally go to all their classes. I'd love to know what normally means, but I guess 87% think whatever they do is normal. 73% say they can deal with the stress they feel at universities, and 63% say they have good study habits. Relationship to a couple of these questions with students' grades: as students' reported grades increase, they are more likely to agree that they can deal with stress, and they're more likely to agree that they have good study habits. In terms of perceptions of their education, 83% say most of their courses are interesting to them. 82% say their course load is manageable. 78% think they're in the right program within their first year, and 78% say they had adequate info about their program before enrolling. Relationship here to grades and feeling their course load is manageable: as grades increase, students are more likely to say that they feel that their course load is manageable. In terms of their perceptions of finance, 74% think that they have or agree that they have the financial resources to be able to complete their program. So 1 in 4 are the inverse, where they do not think they'll have the financial resources. And 68%, or a little more than 2/3, say that they agree that a university degree is worth the cost. In terms of their perceptions of persistence, 89% say they plan to come back to the university for the next year. It drops down slightly to 84% who say they plan to complete their degree at this university. 10% say they plan to transfer to another university next year, and 9% plan to transfer to a college or cégep in the following year. Look at some of their overall evaluations of their experiences on campus in terms of their satisfaction with the university and their decision to attend, or the concerns shown for them as an individual. Similar results, with slightly higher being satisfied with their decision to attend at this university. A quarter say they are very satisfied with their decision to attend this specific university. You can see, when you take the dissatisfied at about 9%, that's give or take, about the proportion who don't expect to be returning next year, give or take. We also asked the Net Promoter Score, so students who would recommend their universities. The Net Promoter Score question is an 11-point scale ranging from 0 to 10, and it gets grouped into 3 groups based on their score. So what we find are promoters. Those are people who rate the university a recommendation of a 9 or a 10. Those are your promoters. Your passives, those are people who rate the university in terms of recommendations as a 7 or an 8. And then your detractors are those who rate it a 6 or lower, so that's a 0 to 6. What this does is allows people to create what's called the Net Promoter Score, which is taking the percentage of promoters, subtracting the percentage of detractors, and that leaves you with a Net Promoter Score of +3. We do find a number of differences in the Net Promoter Score amongst various groups. Group 1 universities, so the smallest universities, students have the highest Net Promoter Score at a +12, where Group 2 and Group 3 have a similar Net Promoter Score. Group 2 has a -1, and Group 3 has a +1. We also find differences here by age. The oldest students, those first-year students who are 22 and older, they have the highest Net Promoter Score at a +21. Anyone younger than that typically has a Net Promoter Score of around +1 or +2. Those who identify as female, they have a higher Net Promoter Score. Their Net Promoter Score is a +8 compared to men who have a Net Promoter Score of -3 overall. There's also a very significant relationship to grades. As students' grades go up, they are more likely to say they would recommend their university. Those who have an A or higher, they have a Net Promoter Score of +11. Those who have a C or lower, they have a Net Promoter Score of -13. So looking at students' goal development, so where are they in terms of their goals? 79% at this point say they have chosen their major. 36% say they have a specific career in mind, with 21% saying they know their career options well. After graduation, 29% say they plan to apply to a professional program, and 31% expect to apply to graduate school. Terms of the facilities and services they have used on campus. So what facilities and services have they most likely used? We ask about 26 different facilities and services. So in terms of use, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where a third or more use them often or very often. That is on-campus bookstores and food services the most, as well as online bookstores, library resources, and academic advising. Some relationship here, students by age. The older they are, the less likely they're to use specific services such as bookstores, either on campus or off or online, food services, athletic facilities, and university residences. Also, some differences here among students who identify as racialized. They are less likely to use some services, and less likely to use on-campus bookstores, residences, and parking. Then, amongst those who've used the services, we ask them how satisfied they are. Generally speaking, students tend to be satisfied or highly satisfied with the satisfaction of services on campus, with most receiving scores of 80% or higher. There are two that stand out. That is food services at 70% and parking at 55% satisfied. So first year students looking at their current employment status. So right now, 36% say that they are currently employed, either full or part-time, averaging about 15.6 hours per week. When we ask students to say, well, what impact does your employment have on your academic performance? 13% say it's positive, 40% say it has no impact, and 39% say it has a negative impact. I think the negative impact is fairly easy to understand in terms of what students mean, most likely is related to their grades. In terms of positive impact, some qualitative research we've recently undertaken, students speak to the positive impact in two ways. They often speak to it about it being a relief or a stress relief from university. It gives them the ability to interact with people. It takes their mind off of their studies and acts as a way for them to sort of decompress. But also, there are those who say, that what they're doing for work may relate to their what they're studying. And it allows them to sort of more fully see and understand what it is they're studying at university. We do see some differences here by number of groups. Group 1 university students, so those at the smallest universities, tend to work more hours on average. They work about 6 hours a week on average. That's likely related to the fact that we remember that Group 1 university students were the most likely to be attending part-time relative to Group 2 and 3. The older a student is, the more likely they are to be working, and the more hours they work on average. Looking at students' financing, so the first year does not go into a lot of depth. The middle years and graduate go into more depth around financing. But we look at students in terms of the proportion that have a credit card, and 53% come in, so they have at least a credit card. 85% say they do not carry a monthly balance, so they pay off their credit card each month. And those who don't pay it off, they carry an average debt load on their credit card of just under $4,000. Some differences here. The older a student is, the more likely they are to have a credit card, and the more likely they are to carry a balance. That is, they do not pay off their credit card each month. Also, Group 1 students also tend to have higher credit card debt than Group 2 and Group 3 students. terms of their financial awards, 56% say they received a financial award from their university. Of those who have received a financial award, about a third of those, so you're looking at overall about, 20-ish%, give or take a little less, say they would not have been able to attend university without that financial award. Group 2 students were most likely to report that they received a financial award. There's also differences here by grade. Students with higher grade were more likely to report receiving a financial award than those with lower grades. So 66% of those with a grade of A or higher, they said they received a financial award compared to 42% of those with a C or lower. And the older a student was, the less likely they were to say they received a financial award. Looking at equity and diversity questions, looking at students' gender identity. So this is what they report in the survey. You can see a number of different options here. So overall, about 91% of students identify either as a woman or a man, and 3% do not identify. They prefer not to answer. Looking at sexual orientation, students are less likely to report on their sexual orientation than their gender identity. 11% say they would prefer not to answer their sexual orientation. The largest group are those who identify as heterosexual at 65%, or about 2/3 of students. So there was each year, CUS adds a module to address issues that are ad hoc or sort of pertinent. At the time, this year's module was around housing. So participating institutions could opt into this module if they would like their students to have been asked this question. So this isn't out of the full sample, but the vast majority of institutions do participate in the housing module. So students were asked for their perceptions of their current housing situation. And you can see that the majority agree that their housing situation feels safe. They live in adequate situation for their academic needs. 74% agree that they're able to afford utilities and rent. So there's about a quarter there that do not agree. At the bottom, so this is a negatively worded question. So the 13% are those who agree. So the negative here, that they're concerned that they're going to be forced to move against their will in the next 12 months. Also should point out too that even here in the housing situation, even though it's 93%, you've got around 1 in 20 students here, give or take, that do indicate that their current housing situation is not physically safe. So although it does seem small when you think about it in 1 in 20 students, it means that you're talking about several students in a classroom are going to be in a situation that is unsafe. Just try and visualize that. So in terms of their preference for their living accommodations for the upcoming year, sort of group these at the bottom where you've got about 1 in 5 say their preference is, a house or condo they own, a university residence that's shared, a partner or spouse on campus. Then you sort of bump up to a university residence suite, which would be on their own, renting off campus alone. And then at the top, you've got living with parents, a university residence with their own room, and renting off campus with others. Difference here, as you might expect by age, the older a student is, the more likely to say that they would prefer options where they're going to be off campus and not living with family. In terms of reasons for so students who say they would prefer to live in university residence, in terms of the main reasons why, you can really see that at the top end, the main reason is just the convenience. It by far dwarfs everything else as the reason. Cost sort of comes in second, but the convenience is by far the biggest driver of the reason for wanting to live in residence. Whereas for those who chose an off-campus option, the reasons that they said, you can see what groups at the top again is cost. They expect the cost to be a driver. Not sure if that cost means higher or lower, but that cost is the main driver of wanting to live off campus. Also just the convenience, and then having fewer rules relative to living in residence. So what is their anticipated cost for off-campus housing? So their anticipated cost on average for rent is around $900 for their share, and an average utility bill of around $200. So on average, students expect to pay around $1,100-ish per month for the rent and utilities combined. If you think about the median, it's about 850, give or take. Students who identify as a racialized person, they expect to pay more on average for their utilities and rent than those who do not self-identify. It's a difference of about, on average, in total between rent and utilities, of about $200 extra per month between those two groups. When thinking about their concern for finding housing for the upcoming academic year, about 12% say that they are concerned or very concerned about being able to find housing. And the primary reasons for their concern are primarily around affordability. So it's about finding something that fits and they can afford relative to the cost. Otherwise, secondary are around the finding something that's suitable. So you can find something perhaps that is affordable but not suitable, and then the distance from campus. So in terms of when students expect to be able to finalize their housing for the upcoming year, but 1 in 5 say they don't know when they're going to finalize it. The biggest thing is 1 in or half have said they've already secured housing. A lot of these are going to be those who are living with family. But you've got 17% who thought about it before the end of the semester, and about 1 in 10 who thought they'd be doing it in the summer, with few thinking they would be doing it and waiting till the fall. So those are the results from the survey. What we're going to look at now is results from the 2025 experiment. And so each year, CUSC runs an experiment to understand aspects related to survey response rate, survey responses, and a number of different factors. And so this year, the CUSC experiment looked at how incentives affect response rates. And so we were testing the hypothesis that offering a large national incentive would improve survey response rates. And so each university could opt into the experiment. And what it was half of their sample was given access to or told about this additional national level incentive, where there were one of two $600 prizes. So in the email students received, it indicated to say you would receive you would be entered into the draw. And so this is the line that was entered here. By completing the questionnaire, you will also automatically be entered into a draw for one of two CUSC national prizes of $600 each. And in total, 39 institutions opted into this experiment in 2025. Should be noted, you'll notice that 39 does match the number of institutions. There are non-member institutions that aren't included in the result. Non-member institutions could also opt into the experiment as well. So when we look at the results at a national level, on the left-hand side, those are those who received the extra incentive. On the right-hand side are those who did not. You can see the percentage who completed were almost exactly the same. 23% who got the additional incentive completed the survey. 22% who did not receive the additional incentive did not. So a 1 percentage point difference. This yellow group, those who are dropped, is also important because you would think if that incentive is working, you would also see perhaps a greater dropped rate with at least students clicking the link to start or look at the survey because that incentive may be, but that doesn't seem to be the case. It does not seem to really have much, if any, effect. However, when we start to look at some things, because I was, to be honest, a bit disappointed that this didn't work in the sort of way I expected to work. So we did a little bit of digging to try to figure out why. So this is a breakdown, perhaps maybe hard to see, but a breakdown of the difference between the no experiment and experimental groups by institutions. So on the right-hand side, when we see a negative, it means those who did not receive the experiment, that is, those who did not get the additional text, have a higher response rate within that institution. So red meaning the group that didn't get something, logically you thought if you add something should be higher. So that's what the red means. So there's a pattern to this though. The pattern is this table is ordered from the smallest to the largest institutions by their sample size. And so what we see is the vast majority of institutions where there is a negative influence, so that is where the experiment perhaps didn't work, or didn't have an effect is the smaller institutions. All of those highlighted there in red have a total sample size of 300 or fewer, which means you're 150 assigned to each experiment. So some of those negative numbers there are going to be the fact that when you're dealing with these small samples, that you're literally talking in some cases a difference of perhaps a couple of students, right? 2 extra students versus 3 extra students completing versus not completing when those samples are so small. The ones highlighted in green, I think, are the most important to look at. And I think this is where the conversation around incentives, I think, is most important. The 3 institutions that are highlighted in green are all institutions that did not offer any type of incentive to their own students. So institutions can offer any incentive they want to their students. These 3 specifically had no incentive for their students. So the only incentive that these students were offered would have been the national incentive. Here's where you can see a really stark difference between the experiment and no experiment group. Almost 9%, 3%, 8%. Those are on the higher end. Like you've got this one at plus 8.4, but again, very small sample size. But these ones here, 3 institutions, no incentive, and they also tended to have sample sizes in the middle, which would tend to be around 500 to 1,000 students. And so to me, what this really says is an incentive, talk about in terms of the conclusion. So the addition of an incentive didn't have the expected strength of results. The impact it has on institutions at the small level, perhaps the additional incentive, the negative impact on response rate. So some of that may just be due to random error because of the smallness of their sample sizes. But perhaps maybe with those small institutions, what it does is in some cases, maybe that incentive may act as a disincentive for those smaller institutions because you you know when you're going to a small institution, it's not a surprise to you that you're going to a university with a incoming cohort of first year students of 200 or 300. And so perhaps you know, saying there's a national incentive could do 2 things. It might confuse students to say, well, maybe this other incentive is also national, or it might, whether consciously or not, might sort of trigger something to say, oh, I am a small fish in a very big national pond, and maybe that sort of influences them, perhaps. What this really says to me is the story for those who did not offer any incentive is this is the drum we've been beating at PRA for a long time is incentives increase response rates. So the addition of a secondary incentive or the addition of something in addition to what's being offered perhaps is not necessary. But what this does say to me is that an incentive works over no incentive because those 3 institutions that had no incentive for their students when you add in the national one, saw increases of 3 to 8%. If you think about an 8% increase, if you have 1,000 students, that's an extra 80 extra responses. That is, if you think about your margin of error, dropping that down, quite significantly. So just any incentive helps to increase response rates. And so, do you need extra incentives on top of incentives? Perhaps not, but the offer of any incentive is important. So just wrapping up, and then we'll open it up to any questions people may have. So the CUSC 2026 survey is the survey of middle year students with a focus on so all those aspects around motivation that we looked at today, reasons for attending university. Those are specific to the first year. The middle year student looks at things like participation, their growth and development, their commitment to completion, more depth around financing, and their future plans. So some overlap with the first year, but focus on other aspects as well. This recording, unless if you're watching it live, you're seeing it live. If you're watching it on YouTube, it's showing up on YouTube in September. So congratulations on finding this on YouTube. And then the AGM for CUSC will be held on Thursday, November 13th, virtually, and you will see information about registering for that. We encourage all people to attend the AGM and use their voices to vote for things. So that is the end of the presentation. So I'll stop sharing at the moment and open it up to any Q&A. I guess people could do it in the chat. They could raise their virtual hand, take off their camera, and mute themselves and talk. Whichever way people feel comfortable or not comfortable asking questions. Question here. Do the results of the housing differ by province? So it's not part of the CUSC analysis in their master report, but the answer to that is yes. Um, I, Ironically, just the other day was looking at these results by province for another report we are doing, and yes, they do uh, differ significantly by province in terms of concern, in terms of average price. So yes, there are differences by province. Great question. So if you're a CUSC member and you participated in the housing module and you got it, there's some analysis. Province is a variable in your data file, and you can just go uh, in SPSS crosstab uh, uprov by house 1 through house 6B, something like that. Any other questions? Wayne, were you unmuting to ask a question, or
No,
you
I
were?
was just gonna,
I was going
yeah,
to break into the.
try to prompt people to see if they had
Oh,
any further questions. I think there is one now.
there is a question. Yeah. So the question is, do you have a sense of whether the specific incentive may have had an impact or less of an impact? Could a different incentive provide different results? That is a great question. So this incentive is the two draws for $600. Um, I would say anecdotally, when I look at institutions and what they offer, um, institutions that offer a more lucrative incentive, either to say everyone who completes the survey gets something uh, specific or offers something of value, tend to have higher response rates. Um, it would be interesting as an experiment to manipulate the value to see how it impacts. I see, if I go back to that table and look, it'd be interesting to see institutions that did have a positive on a bigger positive on the incentive. Like I just identified those that didn't have an incentive, those who had a bigger positive, to see what the other incentive was that they were offering. Like, were they offering, so for example, it's not something someone did, but were they offering a draw for uh, an Apple 2016 32 gig tablet that no one wants, right? No one did that, but that's just an example. So I know in other research that we do that larger incentives work better than offering many small incentives. The logic of offering many small is people go, oh, well, they're increasing their chances to win. Um, People would rather win $500 than have a better chance of winning 25. That's shown through gambling literature. It's shown through our experiences. Uh, what I don't know is what I'll call it is what is the tipping point to say what is the size of the incentive that sort of hits your, because at some point the incentive is going to have no impact, right? You could probably offer, reasonably $2,000. It's probably, not perhaps going to have much difference than five, but it would be interesting to, as an experiment, to sort of understand, well, what's the tipping point? So you mentioned, there's another question. You mentioned a few findings that are correlated with grades. Any insights on what may be the driver in this kind of relationship? Most of the insights I would have are going to be drawn more personally from my experiences teaching at universities. Um, I would say, uh, so for example, um, students with higher grades, there's often a correlation with them um, being on campus and being on campus regularly. And so often their experiences are going to be different because they tend to be students with lower grades in the survey identified the fact that they have trouble managing their time and they have trouble dealing with stress. And often the way of dealing with that stress is to not deal with the stress. So that is not show up to class, not be at university, and sort of there's that cognitive piece of out of sight, out of mind. Doesn't make it better, but that's often the case. So I think there are some relationships there with just the uh, physically being on campus and being on campus regularly, normally going to all your classes, which is the question in the CUSC survey, which is relationship to grades. Um, but then also too, those students with lower grades also tend to work more. And so you may also have these outside factors that are impacting. So whether there's other relationships, and this is something the CUSC survey doesn't look at, whether there's relationships around students and their socioeconomic status. Do they have to be working? Do they need to work in order to help pay for university or bills and those sorts of things? Those may be factors related to their grades as well, given the fact that students with lower grades, tend to be more likely to be working and work a little bit more. But it's a chicken and egg scenario type of thing. So give people a little bit of time to think, come up with these great questions. I love it. So we do have a couple more minutes before wrapping up. If anyone has any other additional questions, if something comes to mind, you can send an email to myself or to CUSC, and we are happy to answer. I know in the past people have put in who may not necessarily be participating institutions have put in requests to CUSC to analyze results at aggregate levels. So, for example, the question around do survey results differ by province? There are requests that CUSC can make to give aggregate level information for those who may be interested in information but maybe are not a member institution, or perhaps maybe your institution didn't ask those housing questions and go, man, it would have been really good to be able to look at that, to say why this province is we have a problem with housing. Housing definitely not a hot topic at all, right? Not a hot topic in the university or political world. So by the way, that was just me stalling to see if there are any more questions. So.
Yeah, and on that note, I guess, yeah, are there any other questions? Not seeing any. Well, thank you, Nicholas and PRA again for your work on this. And for everyone else, oh, there's
Oh, there's
one
one more
last
question.
question. There we go.
Any guess why response rates are getting lower? Oh, it's not a guess per se. I think the response rates are getting lower for two reasons. One is students. Every year, email becomes less and less uh, students' preferred source of communication. If I think of my children, once they get to university, uh, email is not going to be the way they want to communicate or like to communicate now. And so that's the primary way in which we communicate the survey to people. And so I would bet you a lot of those students, if you said, hey, okay, whether it's their personal email or university, how many unread emails do you have? And they show their phone and it's in the 7,000 number, like they're not paying attention to it. That I think is one of, if not the most primary reason. I think the second thing is um, as with each generation, engagement becomes more difficult. I think COVID has had a big impact on student engagement. There's a ton of books around upcoming generations and their levels of engagement and anxiety, and I just think that engaging with these cohorts becomes more and more difficult in almost any way, whether it's in person, online. Engagement is difficult. I know we were just involved in a study at a university looking at student patterns with attending class, and attendance in class is not getting higher. post-COVID. And so I think there's an engagement issue where it's trying to figure out how to engage with students in a way they want to be engaged with. And part of it is surveys as well. I don't think it's unique to CUSC or younger people and their engagement in any type of survey. It's just getting lower. You can see that also with voting rates as well. Ain't going up amongst people 18 to 24. Yeah. Another
And
question:
then, yeah, the final question.
uh, when we get PDF of the presentation? I don't know. It's a great question. Is it posted to? I know the video is. I don't know if we post.
Yeah, the slides.
I don't know. It's a
Yeah.
great question.
Um, we can, yeah, we can look at that and send that out. I think, yeah, Glenn has it. We've been posting both. So, yeah, we'll,
Okay,
we'll, we'll post both of those up.
there you go.
All right. Well, yeah, we're just about at time. So again, thank you, Nicholas, and for the presentation. And thank you everyone for attending. We look forward to your participation in the upcoming 2026 survey. So look out for the communications around that.
Thank you,
All
everyone.
right. Thank you, everyone.